Alrighty. Once again, I want to thank you guys for being here and welcome you on behalf of AACRAO, as well as Georgetown University and George Washington University. Today, we're going to be discussing and celebrating International Education Week 2022 to talk about how you can bring what these students have been doing at their campus to your respective campuses. So before we jump in, I'm just going to do a really quick technical walkthrough. If you guys haven't used Zoom before, if you don't mind navigating down to the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a panel where you can ask questions with our Q&A feature, as well as engage in the chat. And so we really recommend that you guys engage with us via chat. Please let us know where you're from and what drew you to joining us today. I do know that all questions will be held until the end of the presentation, so we'll let our panelists get through the bulk of their things, and we should have about 10 to 15 minutes for your questions at the very end. And we recommend that you use that Q&A section so it doesn't get lost in the chat. Also, just for your knowledge, this is a recorded presentation. And so this recording, as well as the slide deck, will be available post webinar. And if you guys have any questions with the technical side, feel free to message us on chat. But without further ado, I want to welcome all of our panelists here. Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to pass the mic over to Julia Funaki. Welcome in, Julia.
Thanks, Christina. Welcome all, and wishing each of you a happy and memorable and happy International Education Week. From November 14th to the 18th, the U.S. Department of State, in partnership with the U.S. Department of Education, celebrates International Education Week. It's an annual joint effort to elevate the importance of the opportunities that international education exchange brings to campuses and communities, both in the United States and around the world. The theme this year is Open for Opportunity. Today's webinar, How Your Campus Can Make a Difference for Refugees and Displaced Persons, is a special one. It is an opportunity for AACRAO to host a group of students from 2 area universities that are working to make a difference on their campuses. We felt this was a wonderful way to highlight International Education Week and to share with the AACRAO community and beyond how each of us can make a difference. These certain students are certainly striving to do their part to make sure their campuses are open for opportunity. So now let me introduce to you our presenters. From George Washington University here in Washington, D.C., we have Emmanuel Dreyer. She is a junior in International Affairs and Journalism and the Outreach Chair for the Welcoming Campus Initiative. More on that coming up. And also Sean McCarthy, a sophomore political science major who works the Office Relations Chair for the Welcoming Campus Initiative at GW. So welcome to both of them. And also from Georgetown University, we have Zach John. He is a sophomore majoring in science, technology, and international affairs, and he works as the advocacy director at Georgetown University. So without further ado, I turn it over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you so much, Julia, for that introduction. If we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So today we will be speaking about the importance of a flexible admissions framework, the Welcoming Campus Initiative, both at GW and at Georgetown, but also what it is in its essence, and how both of the universities here in the DC area are looking forward to implement the changes that we will be talking about today. Next slide. So to talk about the importance of flexible admissions framework, it's about how admissions practices can be more inclusive and more accessible for conflict impacted students, and what higher education institutions can do to make the application process more accessible. This work was started actually in a research class by Olivia Issa, who is the founder of the Welcoming Campus Initiative. She has now graduated the Elliott School at GW and works at the National Association of System Heads. But this research and the Welcoming Campus Initiative began with her. And also, definitely necessary to mention, a lot of this research, if not most of it, we got from AACRAO's 2019 report titled Inclusive Admissions Policies for Displaced and Vulnerable Students. So a lot of the challenges and a lot of the solutions we have derived from that. Thank you, Christina. Next slide. So to start with some context, there are about 93 million people that are forcibly displaced, with around 27.1 million refugees worldwide. And as we can see there, 5% have access to higher education within the refugee status designation. Next slide. Here we can see how that looks like, how we can visualize that. And also something that is important to mention is that the UNHCR has committed to increase the number of refugees with access to higher education to 15% by 2030. But first, something to mention, refugee status is a legal status, and that doesn't include internally displaced people. It doesn't include asylum seekers. So it's important to note that that number is probably much lower than the 5%. Next slide. So to begin with admissions, we can move to the next slide as well to start with the problems that we have. So a lot of the issues that we encounter when it comes to admissions and accessibility is one of them, formal records. So it can be one of the biggest roadblocks in the application process. Refugee students can lack them because their prior education institutions might not exist due to war and conflict, or communicating with them might put refugee students in danger if they fled persecution. And usually a lot of higher education institutions have formal records as a non-negotiable. So that presents a huge roadblock when it comes to accessibility and the application process in itself. As we put here, another reason for loss is that it's available, that they require it only in a physical format, and a lot of students can sometimes just have it in a picture, but it's not sufficient for some higher education institutions to verify that record. Next slide. So some potential solutions for this: hiring admission staff that have experience in inclusive admission practices for refugees, and also integrate inclusive admission practices into the work of existing admission staff is a solution to this. Actually, for an example, Wheaton College has an international admissions team that has been employing inclusive admissions practices since the beginning of their scholarship for refugees in 2017. And another solution is to accept potential alternatives to official transcripts. Some of the ones that we have listed here are partial transcripts or certificates of completion, or GED and HSE. I know a conversation that we've had with admission staff here at GW is that in a case-by-case basis, they may accept from prior institutions just a list of what credits they took, what were the requirements, and things like that. But that is by a case-by-case basis. But it's important to accept alternative transcripts for the purpose of accessibility. Next slide. Thank you. Another one of the biggest roadblocks is standardized tests. So higher education institutions often require English proficiency tests, such as the TOEFL, the SAT, or the ACT. Next slide. So why are standardized tests such a huge roadblock to the admissions process for conflict impacted students? So these tests can be inaccessible due to financial means. So as previously I mentioned the TOEFL. So the TOEFL is $180 to take it, and to send the scores to schools, it charges students $20 per school report. That in itself presents a huge roadblock for conflict impacted students that don't have the financial means to send in itself $200 just for one school, and if they want to apply to more than $200. And with that, physical or digital inaccessibility, a lot of these standardized tests require physical attendance to a testing site. If students are in refugee camps, if they don't have accessibility to a car, they can't attend to that testing site, they can't take the test, and they can't apply to the higher education institution. And with this, the differences in the education system as well, metric measurements and the differences with that also presents a roadblock to what students can do and how they can apply to higher education institutions. Next slide. So potential solutions. The Duolingo English test is a test that is credited require the English proficiency requirement in the application process, and it is far more accessible than, let's say, the TOEFL. So as seen here, the price is $49 compared to $180, and I know for a fact that higher education institutions can actually request Duolingo to give them fee waivers, which then would make students not even have to pay those $49. But also, it doesn't charge to send to schools. While I mentioned the TOEFL does do that, and also it does not require testing centers. So students don't have to go to that effort to get to the testing site, whatever that means, which can come at an extra cost as well. Thank you. Next slide. Other potential solutions. So higher education institutions can actually write their own tests and administer them for free. They can conduct interviews to assess the English language proficiency, and they can waive the standardized testing requirements for refugee applicants. Now, higher education institutions more and more are shifting from requiring the testing requirements such as the SAT and the ACT, and they're finding other ways to conduct these measurements, which is a huge help for conflict impacted students for the mentioned reasons. And just to add to that, another example is that World University Services Canada, a national program that sponsors around 130 refugees at campuses across the country, Canada. They have their own language exam as well, and they use that to assess applicants. So interviews to assess language proficiency is a part of it, but similarly to doing their own tests for applications, they can also do that for the English test, just to make sure that conflict impacted students have that accessibility factor. Thank you. Next slide. So now I will turn it over to Zach, who will talk about the Welcoming Campus Initiative.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zach from Georgetown, and yeah, we'll be talking about the Welcoming Campus Initiative and how it works, increasing refugee access to higher education in Washington, D.C. Next slide. So we've established the problem of a lack of refugee access to higher education in the United States and globally. But now we have proposed education as a complementary pathway. These, according to the UN, are legal options for displaced individuals to achieve asylum outside of the official UNHCR resettlement process. So the goal is to use education as a long-term pathway to safety. And it was at the same conference where education was brought up as a complementary pathway that the UNHCR made their goal of 15 by 30, which was what Emmanuel mentioned of increasing refugee access to higher education to 15% by the year 2030. So in light of accessibility barriers, scholarship recommendations, and mentorship pathways, we hope to address such problems using higher education institutions here in the US. So what efforts already exist to help displaced students reach higher education? And what are we students in Washington, D.C. doing about the problem? Next slide. And that brings us to the Welcoming Campus Initiative. The Welcoming Campus Initiative is a holistic approach to sponsoring domestic and international refugee students on the university campus through a scholarship and mentorship program. The initiative is designed to be sustainable and legal, a sustainable and legal alternative to resettlement and other forms of asylum seeking. In line with the development of other similar programs in the US and Canada, the initiative began at George Washington University, but is now also in operation at Georgetown, my institution. But before we talk about development, we will establish the aims of the initiative. Next slide. So next slide, and then next slide again. So these are the 4 pillars of the Welcoming Campus Initiative. We have scholarship, admissions, social support, and local partnership. And I will run through each of them and kind of explain how we've built the framework of the initiative at both universities. Next slide. So for scholarship, we've established a few potential different pathways of funding. We hope to eliminate costs for selected students who have refugee status or or are asylum seekers in the DC area and want to study at DC universities. So here on this slide, we have an image with a breakdown of funding costs suited to George Washington University. So these costs include tuition, housing, materials, insurance, travel, visa application fees, everything that a potential student would need to have their stay covered and supported while they're here for their 4 years of study. And then below that chart, we have a few different ways to fund such a program and initiative. So we'll go by one. First, we have tuition waivers. We propose through this method that U.S. higher education institutions would commit to supporting students within a college department. So this models after the Columbia University Refugee Scholarship Program, which has been very successful. They take in about 30 students every year. And what happens is every year, each school or department commits to supporting one new student for their 4 years of study. And so they bring in new cohorts of students every year. And so we hope to model after that kind of system where maybe we could pilot this initiative through one of our schools at a university, and then other schools would hop on and begin to take on students as well. Below that, we have the donation matching model. For this, we would propose that independent donors would cover half of the required scholarship, while the university would match these donations. So if both sides were able to raise around $160,000 for George Washington University, we could fund one new student every single year to come through the program and the initiative. And then below that, we have the student levy model, where we propose a slight increase in each student's activity fee to cover a portion of the scholarship fund. And we've seen this in practice working at initiatives in Canada, where students will bump up their student activity fee by a couple dollars to cover the cost of one student every year to come through the program. Next slide. And now we'll talk about the admissions process, which will deal with many of the issues that Emmanuel brought up earlier. So we hope to negotiate with our respective admissions committees to discuss the lifting of a transcript requirement for those who don't have access to their own or lost theirs or weren't able to acquire one. Ideally at each institution as well, as part of this process, we would have an application committee that would serve the role of overseeing a unique admissions process for these students and taking each student on a more case-by-case basis. We've spoken to many faculty on both of our campuses who have expressed interest in supporting such an initiative and coming on and building a committee together with us. Well, we also have testing accommodations, which we hope to provide for those who have no access to testing or insufficient testing resources where they live. So test waivers may be used if necessary, or as Emmanuel mentioned, we have other alternatives that we could provide through the university. We also have requested that our admissions department work to partner with existing organizations on the campus and locally here in DC to train faculty to review applications well, and then to recruit and select students for the scholarship program. These trained staff would be suited to inclusive and accommodating admissions practices and would make our process more optimized. Below that, we have legal assistance as well, which will ideally be provided through local DC organizations that we've previously been partnering with and volunteering with to help with visa applications or any related issues that students may face when they come here to the US or are seeking more official status that would help them with financial aid or anything related to those issues. And then once established, there would be a regular recruitment process to partner with organizations to find and encourage potential applicants to the scholarship each progressing year. Next slide. And then we have social support. We are hoping to have a welcoming campus team that we establish at the university, which consists of students and faculty who are tasked with welcoming students to campus, providing asylum support, ensuring financial security, and providing long-term mentorship over the 4 years that a student would be present at our institution. And further, we hope to leverage pre-orientation programs that we already have at GW and at Georgetown which can be utilized to assist in a student's transition to the United States and our education system. They would allow students normally to come in earlier in the summer, make friends, receive resources that could help them navigate American life, and get acclimated to the climate here in DC. And then on top of that, we would use student services as well, which again is just leveraging those resources we have on the campus. So language resources, mental health resources. We use the international office, for example, here at Georgetown to help assist students in whatever they need. And we are just utilizing infrastructure that already exists at our universities to help build up an initiative like this. And then after that, we have peer mentorship, which will also play a big role as these students will be paired up and hopefully guided by students who have been equipped to mentor these students from refugee backgrounds. So one example of this is the New Horizons program at George Washington University, where they already have a program that pairs up juniors and seniors in the local DC area from refugee backgrounds with current university students to be mentored and helped throughout the college application process. So mentors receive training and curriculum to follow, and mentees receive a guide to help them navigate life as a student here in DC. So such a program would serve as a model for us to follow in mentorship and could be adapted for the purposes of the initiative. Next slide. And then lastly, we just have local partnerships. So this is a big pillar of the proposal that we have. By the way, we have a QR code in the lower left corner that will link you straight to the proposal where we have in detail all of these pillars listed out. For local partnerships, we have previously partnered with local agencies here in DC, tutoring services, legal services, and organizations that provide support for refugees that come to the DC area, and we have volunteered with them, and they have expressed interest in supporting the Welcoming Campus initiative. So for example, we work with a organization called Asylum Works, which is a DC-based organization that provides support and legal services for asylum seekers in the area. And as we've had a long-term relationship with them and volunteered with them in community events and advising, they have committed to supporting us and wanting to partner up with us in this initiative. So we also work with larger organizations like the IRC and the University Alliance for Refugees and At-Risk Migrants, which is a related student-led organization that operates on a nationwide level to help fund and support initiatives like this on college campuses. And so those are the pillars of the program. And now I'll turn it to Emmanuel and Sean.
Thank you so much, Zach. So this next section will be how the Welcoming Campus Initiative is working at the George Washington University and Georgetown University. So for the first part of George Washington University, I'm going to go to Sean, who will talk about what we're doing at GW and some of the successes we've had. So next slide, and to you, Sean.
Thank you, and Emmanuel and Zach did a very good job of outlining a number of key aspects of the proposal, and just to add a little bit more about what they were talking about, and as Emmanuel said, what is currently happening at George Washington in terms of encouraging the flexible admissions framework that Zach was just talking about a few minutes ago. We're very grateful that at GW they are now accepting Duolingo as the Duolingo English test as an alternative to the TOEFL, which we're very excited that is now a change that has been made, as with how Emmanuel described earlier of the many barriers that the TOEFL can bring for students trying to access that, as well as the expensive cost too. But beyond that, we want to try to make sure that GW has across the board policies for conflict impacted students, and that's really not in place right now. And so we want to try to continue moving forward to change that. And we think that those universal policies, across the board policies, are key to make sure that both the application process is accessible and that students have the access to come here. And an example of something in particular that, as Emmanuel talked about earlier, is those alternative transcripts. So we want to continue pushing with that and other areas to have a more flexible admissions process. And then in terms of the social support aspects, like Zach was just saying, we really want to create a social support infrastructure so that these students can thrive here and can be fully integrated into the community. And one example, as Zach mentioned, would be the orientation programs. We think that it would be really helpful to have orientation programs specifically for conflict impacted students for when they arrive here, and then also ESL services we think are really key, and beyond that, the mentorship that Zach described we think is really important, and that's something we want to build upon, including the New Horizons program that was mentioned, and other programs want to build upon what already exists, and to make sure that support is there. And another key component for all students is financial literacy. We want to make sure that's something that there are resources available for students, both who would come here as part of this scholarship, but also for all students who attend the university, and it could be helpful to many people. And another aspect too that was also recently mentioned is related to healthcare. That's another example of the social support, that type of systems we want in place so that people know how to navigate the medical and healthcare systems in the United States, be able to access mental and physical health care and any types of care that would be needed, and be able to provide support. And in terms of our continued work with establishing professional partnerships with organizations, we want to continue partnering with a number with the number of the organizations that have been mentioned, as well as make any new relationships with organizations that are possible, all to advance our shared goals of supporting refugees. And really, the aim of those professional partnerships is to provide an opportunity for both groups involved, both us at the university and the organization, whoever we're talking with, to learn and grow from one another and be able to support one another. We really appreciate the advice and feedback and support that we get from professional partners, and want to try to be in a position where we can consider and hopefully implement ideas that they give to us to help make the WCI a reality and be fully implemented. And we are very thankful for those relationships we have with professional partners, many of which that have been cultivated through Olivia Issa, who was mentioned earlier, and Emmanuel and others who have established those relationships. And in terms of starting the scholarship, Zach and Emmanuel did a great job outlining the holistic approach that we have, and how we want the scholarship to be something that gives opportunity and respect for that these students deserve, who would be coming to our universities under the proposal. And this would be something that they would both give these students the opportunity and respect they deserve, the opportunity to pursue their dreams that everyone deserves, and also would really strengthen our communities through all they would bring, all their creativity and resilience and knowledge and perspectives of the classroom and outside the classroom as well, across the university and community and broader community as well. So we really feel that this is something that's really important. And if I could go to the next slide, just to give some positive news about progress and some support we have received. One piece of good news was this past spring, the GW Student Senate unanimously passed the WCI bill that was in the Student Senate. So that was a very happy moment, and was a good showing of support. And I noticed a heart there. So if somebody put that's very nice. And yes, that was something that we were very very, very thrilled when that happened as a show of support from the student population. That's something we felt whenever we've talked about this with students, that there has been strong support at the university. And in addition to that, the WCI proposal won first place in International Affairs, Gender and Development GW Research Showcase, which was another really strong showing of recognition for the proposal, and also won first place, as you can see there, the Nashman Prize for community engaged research. And so how we have been encouraged by the support we've received, but we want to keep going and moving further. And we certainly have faced challenges and setbacks as well, and that's something that Emmanuel is going to talk about, and how we're going to try to build moving forward, build on the progress we've made, and try to overcome these setbacks. And I'll turn it back to you, Emmanuel, to talk more about those.
Thank you so much, Sean. And for the challenges that we are facing, like Sean mentioned, we've had successes with the initiative, but we really want to keep the momentum going and make sure that we can implement structures that will make our campus the most accessible it can be for conflict impacted students. So these are three of the main challenges that we have faced, and within them there is a lot more subsections, I'd say. And again, something that is definitely needed to be mentioned is that these challenges are exactly the ones that AACRAO mentioned in their 2019 report that I said earlier. So that's important because not only are we facing it, but higher education institutions all across the US are facing them as well. And the students that are advocating for these measures are too. So the three that are here are funding for the Welcoming Campus Initiative Scholarship, structure of higher education institutions, accessibility as a whole. So starting with actually the structure of higher education institutions. So structural barriers we have seen at GW are actually, I'd say, one of the biggest issues and biggest barriers that we're encountering. A phrase that AACRAO's report used is bureaucratic education system. And I think that is what a lot of higher education institutions have. And that really affects the decisions that administration is making regarding the admissions process, regarding the credential evaluations, and the education culture as a whole. Because it is obviously important to make sure that the students that are coming into your university fit the university and that contribute to the university, but conflict impacted students do. I mean, they are such an incredible part of our community, and they fill all the academic requirements to attend the university. But the barriers that higher education institutions self-impose harm that opportunity of being a reality. So say that because it is so bureaucratic, there is a difficulty in changing even smaller things. I know something that we suggested and that we will talk later of our most important goals for next semester, which is for the website at GW, there's a section for domestic students and there's a section for international students. But we really want there to be a section for conflict impacted students. As Sean mentioned, GW already accepts the Duolingo English test, but a lot of students don't know that. A lot of conflict impacted students don't know how to handle the application process in itself. So those resources need to be available and they need to be publicized. So having a conflict impacted students section in the admissions process would make a huge difference in just removing the simple barriers of just knowing that you can take the Duolingo English test. So that would make a huge impact. But similar to that, kind of talking about education culture, I know Zach may talk about this as well, but is the fact that a lot of institutions now in the US mention diversity, equity, and inclusion measures as being one of their main priorities, as being one of their main goals. And the truth is, when looking at those, making our campuses more accessible to conflict impacted students is at the top of that list. But often because of the structure of higher education institutions, that isn't properly reflected. And that can be attributed to the education culture, that can be attributed to the self-imposed barriers that I mentioned, but at the end, it is higher education institutions that are expressing that these values are a priority, but that aren't really acting with the concrete steps that organizations like AACRAO share. to make these a reality. So kind of moving on to accessibility. So credential evaluations is something that we mentioned, and that is a huge step. It's definitely a part of structure of higher education institutions, but it is one of the biggest factors of accessibility. So the aspect of, like I mentioned earlier, training staff to be able to accredit alternative transcripts is important. Or there are organizations like AACRAO, like I said, also like World Education Services. The Pathway program is a gratuitous program that is able to train staff and tell them how to credit transcripts that they don't usually get, that aren't formal. And that is a huge aspect that higher education institutions don't really seek unless they're forced to. And we really want GW to address that and see what we can do to make it more accessible. Similar, I mentioned the aspect of adding a conflict impacted students section to the admissions page. So conversations that we've had with administration at GW, and I know other students that have similar organizations do across the country, is that conflict impacted students are fit into the same, I say the same group as international students. Of course, a lot of these things sometimes interconnect, but conflict impacted students have different types of necessities for if it's test, if it's English services, things like that. And a huge part of accessibility is acknowledging that and establishing the changes that need to happen. So if it's doing separate orientation programs, then international students, like Sean mentioned, we want to establish that. But I think it's important to make sure that higher education institutions acknowledge there is a difference between conflict impacted students and international students. With that, we can move to the issue of funding for the Welcoming Campus Initiative. Sorry, Christina, if you can go back for a bit. I'm just gonna end with the funding part. Thanks. So just to end there with the funding for the Welcoming Campus Initiative Scholarship, AACRAO mentions financial aid as being one of the main challenges to refugee access to higher education, and we have seen that is 100% true. Our path for funding the Welcoming Campus Initiative has certainly been challenging. Zach mentioned the different paths that at GW and at Georgetown we're exploring. But funding in itself for any small program is a challenge, and then putting that to a 4-year education. For us at GW, it's over $200,000 just the tuition, not including living expenses. And I will say something that we have at GW is that in the moments when we've had that opportunity that Zach mentioned, of having an organization pay for housing expenses and anything that is not tuition, we have university officials say, we can't actually waive tuition even if you have all of the other costs covered. So I think that is definitely a challenge that we're facing. And now it's Zach to talk about how the Welcoming Campus Initiative works at Georgetown.
Great. Yeah. So the Welcoming Campus Initiative has also been taking off at Georgetown University. We have been able to educate our campus through hosting events, tabling, just out in our university common areas to educate the student body about refugee access to higher education. We've been able to fundraise through several events over the past year. We have volunteered to build local relationships and gain support from organizations in the DC area. And we have advocated for refugee access to higher education through this program. Next slide. But like Emmanuel mentioned, we also have unique challenges that are similar but also different in some cases at Georgetown. Georgetown requires a separate application from the Common App, making it increasingly difficult for students to apply and get accepted to the university. So it's a good symbol of a problem that many universities across the US have, of barriers that are stumbling blocks for refugees to apply to the universities to begin with. We also, as an institution, require students to submit all SAT scores. And even during the COVID-19 pandemic, when the majority of the country went test optional, this rule has held still, making it difficult for even domestic students like me to apply to the university. We've also had many funding difficulties, like Emmanuel mentioned, where we've had previous student-led movements that have concerned reparations and other related issues at the university that have failed to achieve or acquire university donations, even when the university has pledged to donate, or failed to implement or pass a student levy model like we mentioned before. So cognizant of these things, we were trying to be more careful and intentional about how we gain funding for this project. And we want to work with the administration to ensure that the scholarship is fully funded, but in most cases, that's the most difficult step. We've also come into some legal barriers with the administration and signing memorandums and other official documents that have prevented us from progressing, even from a legal standpoint, with getting things through administration and achieving support from other local organizations in the area. And lastly, communications with faculty and other members of the administration can be difficult and oftentimes just slow. And these are just a few of the many challenges that we face at Georgetown, but these are common to any student-led movement that'll rise at a university. You will find trouble in finding funding for your program or dealing with administration. And we have to navigate how to deal with the application barriers that Georgetown as an institution has and how we can work around them to adapt the resources that we already have, which brings me to my next slide. That being said, we've had the incredible opportunity to leverage the infrastructure that we have at an institution like Georgetown. So we've worked with the Migration and Refugee Policy Initiative here at Georgetown, a graduate org that has come up behind us to actually support our mission in a great way. Many faculty and students from MRPI have backed us and are helping us with proposal development, with coalition building, and other related processes, even just networking with other faculty at the university. The Institute for the Study of International Migration at Georgetown has also played a very similar role in our development because there are just people at these institutions who agree and want to support student-led initiatives like this. So that's been amazing. We also have existing pre-orientation programs at Georgetown that welcome students from first-gen low-income backgrounds internationally and domestically to come to Georgetown the summer before their freshman year and spend a few weeks here acclimating to the climate of the college environment, to make friends, to be assisted in their transition to campus. And so we've contacted CSP and GSP, our two big pre-orientation programs, and they've expressed a great interest in helping us and partnering with us and giving a community to students from refugee backgrounds if this program were to exist. And we also have international student services that provide language aid, mentorship programs, and other forms of support that can be utilized for this program as well. So all of these centers and programs are very robust and could easily help students that come through. So it's a matter of just leveraging those resources that we already have instead of producing something completely new. So that's how we get to coalition building, where it comes to where we are right now at Georgetown in terms of contacting faculty and showing them our proposal and expressing our interest with students and faculty that have already signed on to our proposal. And that's been very successful so far as we begin to build momentum and move up the chain of command with more and more faculty who want to pitch in and express their verbal and written support for the Welcoming Campus initiative. And then lastly, I wanted to mention something that has been very helpful for us has been pitching to the mission of Georgetown, which is a Jesuit university. Georgetown operates by their Jesuit mission to create people for others. And if our university's mission is to be engaged in protecting the most vulnerable, then this initiative clearly falls under that umbrella. And so we should be appealing to that mission as we begin to talk to deans and provosts and people up higher in the administration chain. So appealing to the mission of our university is just another example of using what already exists at your campus to develop programs that can just be leveraged for the good of other students. Next slide. And so that being said, we've been very excited to use the momentum we've gained to partner with local organizations here in the DC area, like Lutheran Social Services, Immigrant Food, Asylum Works, MRPI, and even local artists who advocate for refugee-related issues. With them, we've been able to engage our student body and establish longer-term partnerships with these organizations that could help build a firm foundation for a welcoming campus initiative if it were to exist at our university. And so these efforts will hopefully make a more seamless transition as we begin to implement our program in the next few years. Next slide. And as for cross-campus collaboration, George Washington and Georgetown recently this past spring had the great opportunity to co-host a Refugee Awareness Week during April or March. As we collaborated, we were able to fundraise together. We held a joint gala to support a refugee advocacy organization. We lobbied together with representatives at Congress. We moderated panel discussions on refugee conflicts at both of our universities, and we hosted further outreach on our campus talking about what the Welcoming Campus Initiative is. Refugee Awareness Week allowed us to further advocate for all the things that we're doing as No Lost Generation and gain more momentum as we headed into this fall. And it also marked just a great milestone in cross-campus collaboration as WCI has now taken root at Georgetown, and we're hoping to continue to expand our network to other universities in the area, which brings me to my next slide. And so that's the goal of the Welcoming Campus Initiatives, to have a cross-campus network. This has already begun on a small scale between Georgetown and George Washington, but we hope to further expand to set the national standard for higher education engagement. We hope to build a cohort network between universities so that we can help build similar programs across higher education institutions in the United States. So this will encourage us to collaborate across our campuses, share resources, mentor each other from university to university, in the same way that GW has kind of helped Georgetown and taken Georgetown under its wing in building up the Welcoming Campus Initiative. We hope to do the same for many other universities like George Mason, and even expanding out into Virginia and Maryland and up and down the East Coast. So yeah, next slide. Looking ahead. Oh,
sorry about that. I double there we go.
No worries. So looking ahead, we're very excited to begin in the next few months, continuing to coalition build at our universities as we begin to speak to deans, and especially at Georgetown, we'll be meeting with the admissions office, the financial office. We'll be trying to build stronger partnerships in our pre-orientation program. So trying to kind of formulate and build a framework for what the initiative could look like specifically at our campus. And we've begun meeting with these faculty and these deans to try and pull together this complete program that is tailored to our resources and is using what we already have so that it's easier on the faculty to bring forth such a student-led initiative. So we're excited to see the initiative grow as we continue plowing forward at Georgetown, and I'll hand it over to Emmanuel and Sean to talk about GW.
Thank you so much. I think just quickly, a lot of the things that we want to establish at GW, Sean mentioned. This includes the financial literacy, the knowledge of the medical system, specific orientations for conflict impacted students. That is going to be our focus next semester, and so will workshops with faculty. We have amazing faculty support, and the admission staff as well is incredible. I will say that faculty at our institutions, I think, have been supportive, specific faculty, and they want to learn about these things. They want to know how they can make our campus more inclusive. So we will be having workshops with our professional partners and them to learn more. And admission staff, I've had meetings where they say, if we can schedule it, we'll do it because it's part of our job description. So we're happy to be establishing those. And I think we can move to the next slide. That is it for our presentation today. Thank you so much to AACRAO for providing us the opportunity to be here. And if there are any questions, we're happy to answer.
We do have one question. We have several questions, but the first one I'd like for you all to address is a good one. And that is, does this have to be a student-led initiative, or can it come from the university itself or others?
Zach, do you want me to start?
Yeah, you can
How do
start.
you? I think, ideally, these initiatives should come from the university. I think that should be what we expect. But that we have seen is that these initiatives come from students. So yes, they can come from university, but usually it's bottom up where these things are happening from student advocates, from faculty that are willing to support them, that find the funds for it, that build the structural support for it, that do resources, that do the research and try to make a reality. And this is a student-led initiative because we saw a gap and we're trying to fill that in our university. So I'd say that, but ideally it would come from higher education institutions. Zach.
I would also say, for example, the Columbia Scholarship Program started as a student-led initiative in one school, and then Columbia came and washed over and then adopted the program for every school at the university. So ideally, say for example at Georgetown, this is student-led right now, but hopefully admin would see the interest and then kind of take over and adopt it as their own so that we could provide more of a supporting role and it would be more university-led ideally. But I think it's really helpful when the students are kind of driving the wheel at the very beginning. Yeah.
And I would agree with a lot of the sentiments expressed by Zach and Emmanuel there, that certainly would be wonderful if university administrations did this on their own, through their own measures, seeing because of the importance of this. But if not, definitely students, any student and any person can really make an impact through trying to get involved in this from the bottom up, like Emmanuel said, and trying to spread support from there. So definitely multiple ways to try to get this accomplished, I think.
So a follow-up to that question, what can other universities learn from the schools, do you think? What are some of the most important things that you've learned from the schools that really are leading in this area? Is there anything in particular that comes to mind? Emmanuel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Zach mentioned Columbia University, and I think there are other really great universities that are leading the way in this. Salve Regina is one, Bard College is one, Guilford as well is another higher education institution that is really putting effort into this. I think honestly, why these universities are leading the way for refugee access to higher education is because they want to lead the way. They want to, listen to organizations. And the truth is, AACRAO is one of the organizations. You released this incredible report in 2019 that established these challenges and gave very concrete solutions to these issues. And other organizations, World Education Services, Syrian Youth Empowerment, provide these tools. So I think it's the difference is that the higher education institutions that are making a difference are doing it because they're listening to what people are telling them and they want to make an impact. Because if refugee access to higher education is a priority, then you will see changes. But I think it's not a priority for higher education institutions, which is what makes the difference. And like I said, the ones that are making a difference, it's because it is a priority.
Excellent. I'm going to jump in actually, Julie, and point us to some questions in the Q&A chat, if that's okay.
Sure.
We had an anonymous attendee ask, do you accept Duolingo for graduate school or just undergraduate? Do you find it rigorous enough? So with the communication that you guys have had with your faculty and admissions staff, what has been the results, people's opinions of Duolingo and the rigor preparing them to actually start programs at your respective institutions?
Zach, do you want to take it, or I can start it? I think, yeah, we've had conversations with undergraduate and graduate admissions, and I think something that is important to know is that there is a difference. between undergraduate and graduates. I think specifically for undergraduates, for international student requirements, they put the Duolingo English test as a valid alternative. So I think it's easier to know. The graduate school does not have it when it comes to their international students requirements. It just has the TOEFL and then another alternative, but it's one of the ones that we mentioned that it still provides a lot of barriers. But I do know for a fact that the graduate school has admitted students with Duolingo. But I think, if the undergraduate admissions has it there, they've established that is rigorous enough. The UNHCR has a partnership with Duolingo, especially for this English test as well. And a lot of higher education institutions have accepted it as being rigorous. A lot of organizations have accepted it as being equally rigorous. So I don't think there's any reason not to think that it is. Yes, I'd say that's the situation for GW and in general about that.
Yeah, I would second that at Georgetown. I think it's a little more difficult trying to get Duolingo across in comms with the admissions office and the language offices, but we have seen specific programs in the grad school at Georgetown welcome in international students with Duolingo, I believe. So this is why I think the university coming up behind the initiative is so important, because, for example, again, at Columbia, they are not only undergrad schools accepting students, but also graduate schools accepting students every year. So I think a similar thing happening at both of our institutions would make the process much easier for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like what's happening is other institutions and other organizations that are pushing for Duolingo and approving it in a sense is helping to move the needle forward, which kind of brings us to a second question in our chat. Someone's asking, I work in a graduate admissions, and specifically for our PhD programs, faculty can be obstinate about academic quality. Do you have any suggestions for moving the needle on that?
I can start. I have a lot of thoughts on this because we've definitely had conversations at GW with administration officials that use there always needs to be a standard. That is what they say to us. But what has become more and more evident is that that standard one is biased in itself. But I think that academic quality, when programs or administrations use it can be an excuse for not wanting to implement these changes, definitely more than the aspect of academic quality, because conflict impacted students. I mean, I think there's this perspective that people coming from conflict might not have education or might not have this, but especially with PhD programs, a lot of conflict impacted students are coming with degrees. I mean, they're engineers, they're doctors, they're professors. The academic quality is already there. So I think, do I have any suggestions for moving the needle on that? We're trying to move the needle on that at GW because that is the problem that we have as well. But if I have any suggestions, what we're doing is, we focus on the framing of it, which is the reality of it, which is conflict impacted students are a huge benefit to our campus, to our community, to our society. And if your program, as we do at GW, focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion being a main priority, I'd say, frame it in a way that really highlights that, because we've said it in this presentation. DEI and efforts and conflict impacted students getting access to higher education goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. And it does look like we're at the top of our hour, but I just want to thank you guys so much again for the work you're doing, and also congratulate you. What a wonderful webinar. You guys did incredible jobs presenting. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your engagement. And folks, I'm going to share the contact information of the panelists that joined us today. So if you guys have further questions, I really, really recommend that you reach out directly. I also want to point you to the QR code, which will bring you to the AACRAO page for resources on displaced and vulnerable students. So this slide deck will be available and the recording will be available post-webinar. And we actually have all of your emails from the registration list, so we'll follow up directly with you guys. And this is such a wonderful conversation. I really hope that we can continue this and make this a series. But as we reach the top of the hour, I'm going to go ahead and close out and just thank you guys one more time. Thank you to our attendees and to our panelists. And I am wishing you guys a fantastic rest of your day. And I look forward to